Welcome to Series 8, Episode 6 of In Suspense, a podcast and vodcast for fans and writers of crime fiction. I'm Lauren North, and my co-host today is the wonderful Lesley Cara, who is back in action after her eyes looking absolutely gorgeous with her mascara on. In our last episode, Nikki and Lesley talked to the always entertaining and thoroughly lovely Louise Beach about her latest book, End of Story, which is out now. And if you haven't yet seen Louise's funny unboxing video on Twitter, do take a look because it is brilliant, as is the book.
Yes, Louise was absolutely brilliant, and Nikki and I really enjoyed chatting to her about the power of storytelling. But this week, our topic is what makes a great book for TV, and we're talking to crime author and TV scriptwriter Simon McCleave, who has worked in Hollywood and on some of this country's biggest TV dramas. But before we get Simon on, Lauren, I want to talk about you and your book, The Ugly Truth, because it came out last week. So how has it been for you? What's publication week been like?
It's been nerve-wracking, I would say. Like I've definitely felt the whole spectrum of emotions, and often within the same day as well. Like I was quite emotional on Wednesday before it came out, and I don't know why. I think it was all just like the pressure and the nerves, but I cried several times about ridiculous things. They were completely unconnected, but you can just tell when your emotions are on a bit of a level. But then Thursday was lovely because I went to Goldsborough in London and signed first editions of the book, which is like a really massive thing to be able to do. And yeah, it was a really wonderful thing to do on publication day. And then there was an event in the evening as well, which was lovely. Yeah, so it's been great. It's just been, it's interviews here and it's podcasts there and it's radio and it's signings and it's wonderful, but it's really busy, and it's busy this week as well. So it's wonderful and exciting. I just need to make sure I'm being extra kind to myself at all opportunities.
Yes, that's very important, isn't it? Self-care. But I'm glad you've been having a super week, and it looks set to continue, doesn't it? So
Yes.
Everybody's raving about it.
Yeah, it's been so nice to see the comments. If you are one of those people that leaves reviews, just know it really does make a difference, doesn't it, to authors? Yeah. So it's so lovely to see people, and just people taking photos of it in shops makes a difference, because I only managed to get to Asda today to see it. So it's been really lovely.
There's no Sainsbury's and Asda's near me where I am here. Otherwise, I would have been out snapping. But we seem to have mainly Tesco's. So
I'm more of a Tesco shopper myself as well.
But if I'm next in a Sainsbury's or Asda, I shall be sure to.
Well, I've got plenty of shops now, so don't worry too much.
Good,
thank you. Now, what have you been up to, Lesley? Because I know you went away to look after your grandson last week, so probably didn't get much editing done. How's it going?
I think it's fairly safe to say I didn't get any editing done.
Did you take it with you thinking you would?
I did. Well, I did. Yeah, I took all my notes and my laptop and everything, but no way. I mean, it was lovely. He's gorgeous. He's 10 months old now. He's full on. And he's one of these babies who is into everything. He doesn't stop still for a single second. And he's gorgeous and lovely and wonderful and really happy. The only time he kind of creates is when you're changing his nappy or trying to get him dressed or undressed. And then he screams blue murder.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, it's a two-person job, really. And guess who always had the dirty end?
No.
Yeah. But anyway.
Oh, lovely. It is strange, isn't it, how we always think we're going to get something done, and like in all these available slots. Like it's me, every time I go to London on the train, it's a 50-minute journey, and I take about 3 times more work with me than I would if I was sitting at home for 50 minutes, because in my head I can just do it, and then I just sit and stare out the window.
Hats off to authors who manage to write books and look after little babies. I don't know how they manage it.
I don't know. Sometimes we see questions, don't we, on some of the author groups, like, oh, how am I going to do this? I'm just like, don't try, just do one thing and then do the other. Like, I don't know how you could possibly juggle it.
I did, but I'm obviously back home now, powering on through the edits. I'm a little bit panicky, although I'm kind of enjoying doing them, but I'm still a little bit panicky because of that sort of looming deadline, which is, I know, it's a movable feast. I mean, let's hope the agents and editors aren't listening, but it's a movable feast. We can take a little bit more time if we need. I'm sure Amanda's, saying, no, get on, finish that bloody book, Lesley.
Oh no, I'm not sure. And have you enjoying doing the edits? Like, is it good fun? Can you see like where you're going?
Yes,
through the trees and all that?
Absolutely. it really does feel like I'm making progress and making it into a better novel. But there still seems to be, I mean, I'm over halfway now with them, but there still seems like an awful lot to do. And I don't know about you, when you first sit down to do them, there's this sort of resistance, isn't it? You think, oh God, have I really got to do this? And it does take a sort of half an hour or so to kind of just get back into it. And then suddenly you kind of hit that little sweet spot and you find that you can either write a new scene or really dramatically rewrite something to make it work a little bit better. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it took me, even just to get started on the edits altogether, it took me about a week. I just was making list after list after list. Like there was the list and there was a list of the list, and it just got it down to as many small bullet points as I could. And I haven't even looked back at it once, because I just think it's all in your head at one point, isn't it? So I'm just hoping on the next read through I'll have a look at the list again.
It'll all come together, I suppose. I mean, yes. I wonder, I think you mentioned before in a message to me and Nikki, that it's kind of magic, isn't it, what we do?
It's nuts.
The constructive edits, structural edits, I mean, I'm sure they do, but do they really understand, our editors and agents, quite how much hard work it is?
I don't know. I'm sure they do. But it's the process of it. Like the magic, I think, is the fact that they're asking us to like change an entire thread or an entire character. And we just manage to hold that in our heads as we're editing without referring back to stuff. Just keep going with it. I just think it's crazy, but it's so draining. I think that's the thing. Like I'm like, I'll get 3 chapters done today and I'll only do 1 because it's really tiring.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you're right. No, they obviously do know. They do know. Yeah. But I think, the trouble is it's a sort of, it's that pull, isn't it, between the creativity and the space and time you need to think things through, and that business side that says, actually, no, I've got to meet this deadline because I can see why they need it by then, because then this has got to happen and the proofs have got to be out, and you can actually see that, but at the same time, that pressure of the time constraints and actually the what you need to be creative and to do it, they don't always they
don't marry, do they? And as we were just saying, weren't we, before we press record, that if there's anything else going on in the day, it just really, even though it might only be like an hour's meeting, it really sort of bleeds into your creativity and your ability to do the structural edits. And I said, didn't I, in a message, that between now and my deadline, which is the 19th of March, I've got 5 working
19th of April.
19th of April, yeah. That was yesterday. That would have been a heart attack. Yeah, the 19th of April, thank you. I've got 5 working days where the kids aren't at home and I've not got any meetings at all. And the rest of the time it's going to be just this big juggling act. So yeah, it's mad, isn't it? It's totally mad.
It's mad. It is mad.
Yes. But Lesley, shall we take a stab at talking about today's topic first of all, which is going back, what makes a great book for TV? Or are we going to get Simon on straight away, do you think?
Do you know, I think we should get Simon on straight away because he will give us lots of pointers in this direction.
I think that's a good idea because I really don't have a clue
and
myself.
I'm really
if I knew, I would definitely have books for TV, but I don't. So lovely. Right. Well, welcome Simon to In Suspense. Welcome, Simon, to In Suspense. Simon, thank you so much for joining us. And before we start, I'm going to read your bio, which is absolutely amazing. So I just had a little practice read of it. I was like, wow, you're an amazing person. So Simon is a million-selling crime novelist. His first book, The Snowdonia Killings, was released in January 2020 and soon became an Amazon bestseller, reaching #1 in the Amazon UK chart and selling over 300,000 copies. His 12 subsequent novels in the D.I. Ruth Hunter crime thriller series have all been Amazon bestsellers, and many have hit the top of the UK digital charts. He has sold over 1.5 million books since 2020, which is absolutely amazing. The Ruth Hunter Snowdonia books are currently in development as a television series to be filmed on location in North Wales in 2023. Oh yeah, fingers crossed. I like that. Yes. Simon has also a very successful crime series set on Anglesey with HarperCollins Avon. The Dark Side The Dark Tide, the first of the series, was the highest ever selling Waterstones Welsh book of the month. Simon McCleave was originally born in South London. When leaving university, he worked in television and film development. He was a script editor at the BBC, a producer at Channel 4, before working as a story analyst in Los Angeles. He worked on films such as The Full Monty and the television series such as the BBC crime drama Between the Lines. Simon has been a scriptwriter for television and film. He wrote on a series such as Silent Witness, Murder in Suburbia, Teachers, Attachments, The Bill, EastEnders, and many more. His film Out of the Game for Channel 4 was critically acclaimed, an unflinching portrayal of male friendship, said Time Out. Simon now lives in North Wales with his wife and 2 children. So, wow, welcome to the show, Simon. That was an amazing bio. So before we dive into our many questions, could we please ask you to tell us a little bit about the Anglesey crime thriller In Too Deep?
Right. So In Too Deep is the second in my Anglesey books. It features Laura Hart, who 4 years earlier, she was working as the chief hostage negotiator for Manchester Police. Something goes wrong, and her husband, who's a uniformed police officer, dies in a siege situation. So she quits the police and she moves with her 2 kids back to Anglesey, where she's from, to rebuild her life. And this picks her up as she decides that she's going to go back to being a detective. And the first crime that she gets to look at, there are some human remains that are found up on the coast. And it's a historic crime about whose remains are they, and it leads us back to looking at the troubles in Ireland and undercover, the SAS, the real IRA, the bombing in Omagh, MI6. So she uncovers this whole kind of dark world from the late 90s. By finding these remains, and it's about finding out who the person was, how they were killed, and whether the person who killed that person is still at large on the island. So
wow.
Thanks, Simon. Well, it's a cracking crime thriller. And
thank you.
What stood out for me, on top of all the twists and the characters and the storyline, was the scenery. And I was wondering, why you chose to set your series on the island of Anglesey.
Well, we moved up. My wife's from North Wales, but I'm from South London, and we moved up here about 15 years ago. But we spent a lot of kind of holidays and long weekends going over to Anglesey. So I got to know the area pretty well, sort of Beaumaris, but also just the whole island, because it's not, it's easy enough to explore. And I suppose, having set my first series in Snowdonia, I was looking around and I thought, well, Anglesey's it's beautiful, but it feels different, and I want to set something still up here. And we have all the advantages of setting something on an island and the island community. And I just kind of thought, that's a really good place. It's a really interesting place with its history, its landscape, its beaches, it's an island. Yes. I thought there's tons of scope here for another crime drama series. So
definitely, and it has that claustrophobic sense, doesn't it? Because the island is so small. I mean, what are the challenges of setting a crime book on a small island?
There's challenges and advantages. They're kind of interwoven in some ways, because there's only 2 bridges off the island. So in some ways it means that people can't escape that easily. You can close the bridges down if you're chasing somebody. You've kind of got Holyhead, so you can kind of head off to Ireland if you want to go that way. So it's kind of, I quite like the kind of the limited nature of it. It's kind of, as you said, it feels claustrophobic. In some ways it's kind of it's a bonus and a disadvantage, but I've kind of used it to my advantage, that people are stuck on the island and they can't escape. But also that kind of feeling that once they do get off the island, that they're sort of like they've kind of gone forever, and it's a different kind of world than once you get over the bridge to North Wales. So I think there's lots of advantages.
And it is an absolutely thrilling read.
Yeah,
as you
thank you.
mentioned, ex-police negotiator Laura Hart makes a great lead character for the series. So as you said, it's not a spoiler that she's struggling with grief, which is extremely powerful throughout the whole book, because her husband is killed on the job. So the grief I found was almost a character in itself, in the same way that The Island almost is as well. And I wondered how hard it was to write that, like, alongside the twists and sort of the police procedural pace that you were also used to. You had this core of depth running through, and I just wondered how you found that.
I just think it's integral to her character at that point. It's like, the grief is something she has to live with every day. She wakes up with it, and she still talks to her husband. She still runs stuff past him. She doesn't want to let the memory of him go, and however that sort of manifests itself. I suppose I just put myself in her shoes and thought what that must be like, and try to write it. But it sort of pervades most of her sort of waking life in various degrees. And I suppose, going back to being a detective does allow her to throw herself into something that's all consuming to kind of get away from it. But in the quieter moments, it kind of comes flooding back. Plus there's we have a detective called Gareth, who there's a sort of a romantic thing going on. So that also brings up all the kind of stuff about, moving on and what does that mean. And I don't know. Yeah, it's just part of her character.
Absolutely, yeah. And this is your second in the series. It's currently out now, and your third is out in June of this year, I believe, and it's called Blood on the Shore. So what can you tell us about number 3?
Well, it's finished.
That's good. I should think so, if it's out in a couple of months.
Yeah. It's serial killer. It's a proper sort of but kind of, I did a lot of research, which is kind of harrowing, but I suppose I didn't want it to be kind of if you're going to tackle a serial killer, I feel like I wanted to write, and also there are chapters that are from the POV of the serial killer. I kind of wanted to get those right. I didn't want something that was kind of melodramatic or unrealistic. I wanted to understand why someone behaves in the way that they do, and to make that feel as real as possible, without making it sensational, without, there's an element of responsibility of being a crime writer in some ways, to get the stuff right, I suppose, and not to glamorize it. So I just read lots and lots and lots of kind of stuff about why, the background of people who end up, killing people for whatever reason. And I don't know, HarperCollins seemed to like it, and we kind of, the feedback was really good on it. So, and it's quite cat and mouse. It's quite a sort of cat and mouse thing, about the first bit's about whether someone they think is a serial killer, and then the second part is much more of a sort of a chase and a cat and mouse between the serial killer and Laura. So hopefully it's exciting.
It sounds exciting, and like you said, there are quite a lot of tropes with serial killer books, aren't there? There's a lot of them out there, and so getting that voice right will really make it stand out. I'm sure. Looking forward to reading it.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's more chilling if you get it right. I think if someone's kind of it's just my taste, but if people are kind of doing very sort of outlandish things to people and stringing them up and cutting them to pieces and put them on bits of trains or whatever it might be that I kind of find so fantastical, I sort of find it less scary. I sort of find it much more scary when you kind of go, this is the stuff that we read about.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that sort of feels like it's someone could be next door.
Yeah.
Who you see walking the dog and you say hello to, and you have no idea what actually is going on. I find that much more frightening.
Yes, that really is. Yeah, and as you say, the research must have been quite harrowing as well, having to plough through all those accounts.
It wasn't great going to bed and sort of thinking, oh, I've just been reading chapters on Ted Bundy. It wasn't the best time bed reading.
Not designed to send you off into a sweet and dreamless sleep. For sure.
No, I'm glad I finished that now.
Anyway, before we sort of talk about our topic for today, I wanted to ask about something that's written on the front of the book. Now, your first crime novel in the Ruth Hunter Snowdonia Killings series came out in January 2020, and you've since had eight further Ruth Hunter books out, plus 2 in the Anglesey series. So we make that 11 books in 3 years. Is that right? With another one coming in June. I mean, Do you know, I've only just met you,
20.
Simon, but I've gone off you
Oh.
already. How do you manage? I mean,
Well,
seriously.
I kind of need to update that. The 14th Ruth Hunter book came out a month ago.
Wow, so it's
And
more than 11.
So how many Ruth Hunter books have you done each year then?
well, I've written 20 books
Don't
since
say
the time I
cheese.
started writing.
Okay,
Which is
Simon, how do you do
ridiculous.
it? This is the question. How do you write so many books in such a short period of time? And everybody at home will be poised with their notepads,
Yes.
waiting for your answer. So no pressure.
The only thing I can think of is that when I used to write for TV series, the turnaround of rewriting, writing fast, writing dialogue, writing scenes, and then a script editor ringing you at 6 o'clock at night saying, this needs to be done by tomorrow, we're filming tomorrow, and these scenes need to be rewritten, and just doing it again and again and again, and sort of the relentless pace of writing something like The Bill or EastEnders, where there is no room for sitting and thinking and looking out the window. You're just doing it.
Wow.
And when I started writing books, I wrote at that pace, and I don't know how to write any other pace.
Well, we were talking about this earlier, Lauren and I, in our little intro that we do before the guest comes on. I was sort of saying how that pressure, the time constraints and the deadlines and the having to do things quickly from the business point of view doesn't always marry up with the creativity and the space and time you need for the creativity. But obviously you've developed a way of being able to condense that creativity and to make it work much quicker. So I'm in awe.
Yeah, me too. If I could just have some of that, please.
I don't know. It's that thing, is like, that sort of thing. I sit down and write, and then I don't know what else I would do, and I don't know how to write slower.
Isn't it? It's a discipline.
Yeah.
And also it's like, it's not, I kind of go, it's not really a proper job. It's like, I get to make up stories and I love doing it. So, if I'm not tarring a road in the rain or something, so which would be, so I count myself as lucky, and I'm very happy to kind of sit and write sort of the next chapter. I kind of think it's a gift, isn't it? I kind of think
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, follow up to that, you were previously self-published and now you're writing with Avon. So how have you found the difference between sort of being your own boss and doing everything for yourself, the writing and the marketing and what have you, compared to working with a publisher? What have been the key differences?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of hybrid. So, I've got another book out. Book 15 of the Ruth Hunter comes out in April. So I'm not giving up one for the other. I'm just doing them sort of in tandem. To be fair, now I'm pretty much an indie publisher, because I have someone that edits and proofreads, I have someone that does my covers, I have someone that runs my ads, I have a PA. So it's a team. I have a team of 7 or 8 people who help me with that. So it's not, I'm no longer, the first few books I did have to do everything myself, because of time constraints and because they sell well. I now but it's interesting. Working with HarperCollins, actually it's Avon who are sort of imprint, but they are wonderful, wonderful people. They are such a lovely people to work with. So the advantages of going for a traditional publisher are that I get to work with fantastic editors who improve my writing, who will kind of push me and say that scene could be better, that character could be deeper. So it's improving my writing. So I kind of go, well, that's a really good thing. It gives me access. So for example, Into Deep was in Tesco's and it was in WH Smith's. Well, I can't, as an indie, I can't get my books into there. I can't do a print run, or I don't have the contacts to get my books into supermarkets. I get invited to lots and lots of crime festivals, which as an indie, you don't.
No.
For whatever reason, you don't get invited. And get to do book signings, which is really fun. So lots and lots of sort of, it's the process is the time scale is blows my mind, because I write books that are kind of like, I'm writing books that then are kind of not going to be published for 6 to 8 months, whereas indie wise, I'm finishing one book and it's out within 4 weeks, and it's like the turnaround is just very quick. So I quite like both. I quite like both at the moment. It's quite nice to do both, and they both have their advantages. So it keeps me busy.
Gosh, yes. Sounds like it.
And great that you've got, like you said, the two strands running side by side, because I do something similar in that I have two brands. And I think it's great that you, I mean, I'm sure you find it the same, like there's not a moment to stop, because if you're not working on one, you're working on the other. So that's great, especially with traditional publishing, as I'm sure you found, is much slower than self-publishing. So you're able to work on whatever you want to work on at your pace, which I think is brilliant. So our topic today is what makes a great book for TV, and you're the perfect person to speak to, Simon, as not only have you worked in TV and script writing for most of your career, but your Ruth Hunter Snowdonia books are currently being adapted to TV. So I guess my first question is, can you tell us a little bit more about your career and how you got into script writing, please?
Gosh, it's a long time ago. I started off in development. So I started, this is like early 90s. So I worked in development of film and TV, which is basically reading scripts, feeding back to writers. I then worked as a script editor at the BBC drama department. So then I was working with writers on their scripts, hopefully making them better, or taking a project and sort of commissioning scripts and all that kind of stuff. So kind of involved on that side. And then I realized that I was kind of doing quite a lot of creative stuff and coming up with ideas for TV series, and then writing them myself. So I kind of thought, well, why don't I give that a go? So I just started writing scripts. I started off writing on Doctors, which I think is still going.
Gosh, yeah.
And just did it for a while, and it was like, and for a while it was fun, and by the end it was less fun. It kind of burns you out, and I think the beauty of being a writer of fiction books is that you have much more creative control, and you're kind of like, you're the kind of creative voice behind the whole thing. When you're the writer on a TV series, there are producers, exec producers, there are directors, there are cast, there are production designers who all chip in, and so your vision of something can get really lost. And it's quite a brutal world, and it's a very egotistical world, and it's quite hard. And I've been, when I first came into publishing, I was a bit sort of overwhelmed by how nice people are, and supportive and generous, and people will share their ideas, and the egos seem to be far less. I was like, oh my God, this is lovely. Everyone's really lovely.
We're a lovely bunch, aren't we?
We're so good, yeah.
And other crime writers will kind of talk to people, and they'll sort of share ideas. They say, "Oh, have you tried this and stuff?" And that doesn't happen in TV and film. People are just anyway.
Cutthroat.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Very ambitious people in TV. Everyone has their own agenda, and everyone is kind of self-serving and slightly self-obsessed. And I get to publishing and I go, wow, everyone's lovely.
Yeah, everyone is. On the whole, there are a few assholes, but there are in every walk of life, aren't there? But on the whole, you're right. It's an incredibly particularly crime writing community.
Yeah, everyone's lovely,
supportive. Yeah. So the $1 million question: what does make a great book for TV?
Characters. I think you start with the character. That, whether you kind of look at Rebus or Vera or Shetland or Prime Suspect, it's like the first thing I think of when you say those series is the central character. A central character that is flawed and you want to find out about, and is interesting and feels three-dimensional and convincing. And it's that stuff, isn't it? You kind of want to tune in and find out. And they can be quite someone like Vera, McCleave's Vera, is like, she's really cantankerous, and she's kind of not, she can be really unpleasant, but you still kind of root for her and you want to find out. And that makes it more interesting. And certainly Tennyson, she was seriously cold and kind of clinical and yet fascinating. So they don't always have to be sort of people that you warm to in a particular way, but they're characters that you want to, I want to watch next Wednesday and watch what happens, what they get up to. And so that, I would start with the character. I think it has to be something that everyone loves. And then structured stories, well-structured story, I suppose, that hits all those kind of marks that we kind of that both readers and viewers have a certain expectation of what they expect within a crime book series and a crime TV series. And I think if those expectations aren't always met, sometimes it doesn't work. So
yes. Now, we obviously now, most of us know about CGI and special effects. And it's amazing what you can do with TV and films with aging, for example, and all sorts of things. But are there any topics or storylines that we regularly see in books that you don't necessarily see very much in TV, that perhaps doesn't transfer very well to TV? I guess I'm thinking from my own experience of dual timeline novels, for instance. Like a lot of my agents always said, yeah, that's another dual timeline, so that's not going to make it into TV that easily. Is there anything that doesn't work, and is there something that we will always get snapped up with?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I can't think of anything that springs to mind that I think wouldn't be tackled by television. Certainly dual timelines. I mean, historic stuff. I watched Karen Pirie, which was a Val McDermott book, but was then adapted. And that was like, there was a lot of kind of different timelines running in that. And it worked okay. I think in terms of, if you're looking at historic crime, you want to be flashing back. It can be confusing. I understand that, but I think it's done pretty well. And as for stuff that's always snapped up, I think setting, actually. I think certainly there's a huge appetite for crime series set in beautiful locations. So it's I suppose I'm looking at Shetland, and I'm trying to think of all the, if you think of a region within this country, there's normally a TV series and or book series that's set in that region. And often the landscape plays quite a big part in that.
Yeah.
Was there a Welsh drama? Was it called Hinterland, set in Aberystwyth? That was really
So Hinterland was like mid to West Wales, but yes, that was
yes,
out on the coast.
Yeah. Now, we also heard in your bio that you were a story analyst in Hollywood too, which sounds really interesting. What does that actually mean? What's actually involved in being a Hollywood story analyst? Because it sounds terribly glamorous.
Yes, it wasn't, but
I had a feeling you were going to say that.
Basically, I was paid. I had a few contacts from London and then went out to LA. I was given film scripts, and then my job was to look through them and kind of do a report on what I thought was good, where it worked, where it didn't work. So, and analyze it as a kind of, so that a producer or a director could look at it. Also, I'd like to do a quick synopsis of the plot so that someone could pick up a script and they could look at it and then sort of say, right, someone's already looked at this. They've already said what they think, and they've given me a kind of overview of the story. So does this sound like, rather than reading the whole script. So it's called coverage actually in America. So I did that for a while. It was all right. It was, I lived on Venice Beach, and that was kind of cool. It was quite fun. And I remember getting my first job was reading a script that Burt Reynolds wanted to read, and he didn't want to read the script, so he wanted a report on it. So I was like, okay, Burt Reynolds, that's so cool. But
I can see you sitting in Venice Beach, reading the script and thinking about Burt Reynolds. It does sound glamorous, but I get your point that it's,
And also, I think for me, it was dipping my toe in to see whether I wanted to stay there and actually stay in LA and work. And if you've ever seen something like Entourage or Swimming with Sharks or anything like that, that's pretty much what it's like. If you think that the British TV and film business is cutthroat, then you go to LA and it's a whole new planet. It's like and it was the 90s, so it was probably kind of worse in terms of behavior. And I only sort of witnessed bits of it, but it was just not. I just went, this is not for me.
I think we'll stick to Suffolk, Lauren.
Yes, let's
nice and
Suffolk.
Nice and safe and gentle.
Yeah.
Now, did that whole process of being a story analyst and all that sort of experience and script writing, did that change how you went about writing your own books? Having done that, did that influence you in how you?
I think absolutely. I think that everything I'd done up to the point where I first started writing a novel had been based around storytelling. I mean, everything I've ever done has been about storytelling, whether it's working on scripts, writing scripts, analyzing scripts. It's about structure, character, dialogue, themes. So I suppose everything I'd ever done up to the point of, and I'd read a lot of books, I'd watched a lot of TV and films. I kind of think, and it's sounding a bit eccentric, but I kind of was always drawn to crime anyway. So I spent a lot of time reading, writing, watching crime. And I guess, so when I first picked up a book to write a book, I kind of had it sort of, is all, was swirling around up here, but it also felt a little bit like part of my DNA in terms of, I kind of have an instinct now about how to structure a story, what a scene should look like, how the dialogue should sound, because I've just done it for so long. It's sort of, it's all I've ever done.
Yeah, it's become second nature to you.
Yeah, and in a slightly obsessive way, but
I know people, or I know authors who, when they write their first draft, they actually write it as a script. Do you do that when you're writing your books? Do you sort of plan it out a bit more like a script and then fill it in with all the detail of the book, or do you just?
I did. Well, when I first wrote the first draft of the Snowdonia killings, it's like it did read really like I didn't know what I was doing. Even though I'd read books, I wrote it as though it was a script. You're right, and there was a lot of head hopping and POV and all sorts of. But I had a very good editor for my first 5 books, and she basically bashed it all out of me and went, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. So I learned to write novels by starting off writing a sort of script version of a novel and then getting someone to work through it and go, you can't, that's not how it works in publishing, which was good, because it kind of so I kind of got rid of all my terrible habits. And so now I think, I still sort of see, everything I see is visual. So
yeah, well, I think a lot of us do when we're writing, but that's really interesting the way that you've changed how you write now. What advice would you give to an author who'd love to see a book adapted to TV? Are there any now trends that producers love?
Everyone will tell you that they don't want cop shows.
Even though there are so many.
Which is nonsense, because every time a new series comes out, it's a cop show. So it's that kind of thing of going, no, we've got too many. And you're going, well, that's not true, is it? I'm guessing, I suppose you didn't need an agent, and you would need a producer who really, really loves your book. I think it's rare to be able to send a book. Your agent will be able to tell you this. They would. I'd be amazed if anyone took a book without an agent. So I think before you even started, you wouldn't be able to cold call someone and say, "Can I send you my book at the BBC?" I don't know. I'm not very good on this, because having worked in development and in TV, I know how long stuff takes, and so in some ways, you have to be very, very patient.
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of times when we speak to authors, they say, you think publishing's slow, but actually the film side of things is really slow. Whereas you've now come from the film and TV stuff to publishing. It must feel quite quick to you, in fact.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And also just, certainly the indie side, I get to write a story. I get to write what it looks like, who the cast are, and then I press a button and then people read it. And you think that's a gift.
Yeah.
I think there was a British woman that was one of the writers on All Quiet on the Western Front, and that took 14 years, I think, from the time that she wrote the first draft to it coming out this year. So I would say that for me, although this sounds kind of negative, if my Snowdonia books get made into a TV series, that is a lovely bonus, but I am not holding my breath. And it's not something that I'm counting on either, because I know how many things go into production and development and then fall the last kind of hurdle. So I would say it's nice if it happens, but it's not something you can ever count upon. And also you'd have to deal with people in TV.
that cutthroat business. So authors
we've already heard how nice they are.
Yeah, they're lovely.
So authors should just be trying to write the best books they can write then, and TV is always just the bonus, I guess.
Yeah, I would never be writing books thinking this is bound to be made into a TV series.
Yes.
That's very good advice. Thank you for that, Simon. Now, our final question today is what you've been reading at the moment. You know, whether there's any books you'd like to recommend to our listeners, anything you've recently read and thought, wow, that was great.
Yes, I've just read a book called My Dark Places by James Ellroy. It's quite an old book. If you're aware of James Ellroy, obviously wrote LA Confidential and a sort of dark American noir. But he was basically, the story behind the book is that he was commissioned by GQ magazine to look into his mother was murdered in the 1950s by an American diner, and very much like something out of one of his books. And he teams together with the LAPD officers of that time, who are now older and retired, and the book explores how they reinvestigate the crime of his mother's murder, and they try and pin down if they can work out who did it. So for him, it works as a sort of an autobiography, looking back at his childhood, very sort of dark stories about as he grew up, and it's also an investigation into a murder, and yet it's all real, and it's a sort of real self-exploration into sort of darkness of him. You know, My Dark Places. But it was a really powerful book, really powerful, and I love James. I'm a big fan of all the kind of American writers like Michael Connelly and George Pelecanos and James Ellroy, and all going all the way back to Chandler and stuff. So I was really interested in that. That's probably the best book I've read for a long time.
Thank you.
I'll definitely recommend that.
What about you, Lauren? Have you read anything lately? Or I know you're busy like me with edits.
Very busy with edits, aren't we? But I have read, I was very lucky to get my hands on an early copy of Catherine Ryan Howard's latest book, The Trap, which is out later this year, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Actually, going back to what you were saying, Simon, about a really powerful serial killer is one that you could think is someone you live next door to, and it definitely had that vibe to it with the POV of the serial killer, and it was really quite scary as well. I read it with like my heart in my mouth a lot. So would absolutely recommend Catherine Ryan Howard's The Trap. I've also been sent The Truth About Her by Annie Taylor, which looks absolutely amazing. It's just a proof cover there, and it's all about an Instagrammer influencer, which sounds amazing. And then I've also been sent The Villa by Ruth Kelly, which is about a reality TV show set in an exclusive villa abroad. So both of those are right up my street, and I can't wait to read them. What about you, Lesley?
Fabulous. Well, I've been looking after a 10-month-old baby for the last week, so I haven't really done much reading at all. Not mine, Simon, just in case you're thinking, Christ, she's left it a bit late. It's my grandson. But and also edits. But I am reading the latest Shari Lapena, which is Everyone Here Is Lying, and I'm really enjoying that. I haven't finished it yet, but it's fantastic. I love Shari's writing. So.
Yeah,
it's brilliant.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Well, that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much, Simon, for being our guest. So In Too Deep is out now. It's the second in the Anglesey crime thriller series, and the third one, Blood on the Shore, is out in June. So good luck with the release of that. And
thank you so much.
And your other Ruth Hunter, is it Ruth Hunter books as well? Yeah. Sorry, I just folded my notes up and put them to one side before I was ready. So thank you very much for coming on. And
thanks very much, Simon. We've really enjoyed talking to you. And next week, listeners, is our last minisode with the incomparable Zoe Lee, who will be talking about what authors need to remember about social media. So that should be interesting. And then after that, the week after that, I think, Lauren, it's you and Nikki, who will be talking to Robert Gold about his latest novel, 11 Liars. And he also works for one of the big 5 publishers in Sales.
In Sales, yeah.
An excellent person whose brain we will pick. I hope he hasn't got more than one brain. But anyway, I'm rabbiting, so I'll shut up now.
Yes, so that just leaves me with the final task of saying goodbye from Simon.
Thanks, guys.
Goodbye from Lesley.
Bye-bye.
And goodbye from me.